Welcome, Buff fans. I'm Brian Howell, and please be joined by Matt Smith. Matt, we were doing this weekly for a long time, and then the season ended, and we kind of took a break. We both had a bunch of different things going on, and so we haven't done one of these in a couple of weeks. So obviously, we're going to pick up and do these more frequent. With spring ball starts in a month, and so there's plenty to talk about. But first off, how you been? And like I said, it's been I think 3 weeks or so since we've done one of these. It's been a while.
Yeah, at the end of our last one, we were like, okay, next week we're opening the book on 2025. Next it's happening. And then I think, collectively we just both had tons to kind of address in our own personal lives because it is a 24/7 job covering this program.
Yeah.
And so yeah, we took a little bit of a break and it was good to kind of reset, let everything sink in, finish mourning the end of that era and the last couple of years and get your sights set on next season. And for me, collect a lot of my personal thoughts too. I got a lot going on in my personal life. So for me, it's been productive the last month. I definitely needed to recharge. I was definitely exhausted after the season. I think everybody was. It was just it was a roller coaster of emotions all year long. It was high stress. It
Yeah.
was just under the spotlight. And so it was good to get some time away. And I think everybody got a chance to do that. And I just got back from my first vacation to a tropical location since 2018. So I'm in mourning of the fact that I'm home right now.
Yeah, well, I saw some of your photos and stuff. You were on the water and at a beach, and that's your happy place. So
Oh, that
I
is
was
my
happy for
happy
you.
place. That's my happy place, Brian. And one
Yeah,
day I'm gonna find a way to make it your happy place too. It
you
was
know,
great though. Honestly, I'll tell you what. There's no better cure for forgetting life's problems than jet skis and seeing a bunch of whales. We were down in Cabo, and this time of year, all the whales come into the bay and they have babies and they birth in the bay. Humpback whales and gray whales, and I mean they reported orcas nearby, and the blue whales are up in Laredo. It's just like it was an unbelievable experience to be able to just unplug from the world for a week, and I'm very fortunate and very glad that I was able to do it because I needed it.
well, I think we both like water as an escape, but you like the beach. I don't care for beaches, but I love getting up on a river and going
Hammer them in the
fishing.
comments for that, folks, please.
That's fine with me. But I love getting up to a river and fishing, and I love driving up a canyon where you get out of cell range and you can just get lost in throwing some spinners in the water or flies or whatever. And
Sure.
so that's my happy place. It's tougher to do that around here right now because it's a
It's
little
cold.
cold. It's
I
cold
know.
and icy on those rivers. So I'm looking
St-
forward to
stand,
that in spring.
standing on the beach the other day and realizing that I was coming home to like 5 straight days of snow. I was
Yeah,
having a moment of where
yeah.
I was just, why am I leaving again? Okay, all right, yeah. But you
Yeah.
you haven't had as much fun as I had. You spent 3 days holed up in with the Greeley courthouse.
Yeah, I had some jury duty that I didn't get picked for the jury, but
I'm so glad you didn't. By the way, that was terrible.
well,
That was awful. You
and it
should at
wound
least
up,
mention what it was.
yeah, well, it caused me to miss going to the Shrine Bowl, which made me mad. I had everything booked to go down to the Shrine Bowl the last couple days of practices and actually cover the bowl and talk to all those guys down there. And it was a Tuesday morning flight, but I'd report to jury duty on Monday morning. And I've done jury duty a few times in my life where you get your number called and or you get the notification. And I've had mixed things. There's been times where you call on that Friday afternoon and they don't need you, and so you don't even go in. There's
Right.
been times I've gone on the Monday and you're home by lunch or you're home by the end of the day, whatever. And this one was you knew right away. You sit down, they give you a questionnaire, and they tell you it's a first degree murder trial and that they expect to last until the next Tuesday at least. And so you're like, oh man. And
No,
and so you fill out
please.
this questionnaire and I put on there was no hardship that I couldn't do it. 'Cause, I mean, frankly, going to the Shrine Bowl, it was missing it was not a hardship. It was just, but I did put on there, I have this business trip and I'd rather not miss it. And so late on Monday during the day, the certain jurors had opportunities to talk to the judge, and there was one of the lawyers in there as well. And they pull me in there and they said, "Well, tell us about this business trip." And so I tell them a little bit about it, and they're like, "Well, how big of a hardship is it, and what do you do?" And so I was like, "Well, I cover CU football, and there's some guys down there at the Shrine Bowl, and it's not wouldn't kill me if I missed it, but and the ultimately the judge is like, well, in light of all that, I need you to report tomorrow morning. And I'm like, well,
Yes, of
come on.
course. You're
And
too
so,
honest. Honest Abe over there. For people who don't know, Brian's just too good of a person
well,
to just act a little crazy. The
but then,
behind the curtain is you're just too nice, Brian. I would have been out there coming up with every reason from left field. It's not that I don't want to do my civic duty, but I'm
yeah,
not sitting there for that specific murder trial. Would have been, I mean, heart-wrenching to sit through. That would have been rough. So I'm
yeah.
really glad that you didn't end up getting picked.
Well, but at that point, when I obviously left there, and it's like, well, I have to report tomorrow morning, so I better cancel the trip. At that point, it was like, if you're going to make me miss this trip, just put me on the jury,
Yes,
and
I'll have to sit here if I'm not going to go to the
yeah,
Shrine Bowl.
and so, but it wound up being 2.5 days of jury selection. So I report Tuesday morning, and really literally sat there the entire day. I had nothing to do. So because they were talking to other jurors all day long. Reported Wednesday morning, finally get in the box, answer questions from the lawyers, all that, and I was the second to last one dismissed. And so I was very, very close to being on the jury. And the trial went to the following Wednesday, and the guy actually got
Guilty?
convicted. Yeah, he got convicted
Yeah,
of
well, I
first
knew
degree
that.
murder. So
Yeah,
and sentenced
well,
to life in prison. Um,
from
so
what
yeah,
you told me, it sounds like it was going to be open and shut.
well,
So,
it was
yeah.
yeah, we don't need to get too far into
No,
this
we don't
case,
need to because it's
but it was
brutal.
basically that
Yeah.
you got the impression from all the questioning that they weren't that the defense was not going to argue he didn't do it, because he actually admitted he called the police and said he killed his mom. And so
I didn't know he called the police.
yeah, so
That's
he's the one that called
brutal.
them,
Oh
and
my God, this
he
guy's a
admitted to doing it.
lunatic,
But the defense was
scumbag
he
guy.
was based on the questioning, the defense was going to be that he was heavily intoxicated, and they were trying to get second degree murder as opposed to first degree murder. So but yeah.
Ugh.
And the story that I read last week when the verdict came out was the defense is going to appeal that, which is no surprise. But
Yeah, best
folks
of
are
luck.
bored by
Well,
now without this case. They don't care. But
yeah,
that's what I spent
I don't
3 days
care. I
doing.
don't care. We'll skip ahead if you're bored. This is
I,
our podcast, not yours.
I will tell you this, Matt, that you being a bigger basketball guy than I am,
Yeah.
I'm leaving tomorrow morning actually. My daughter is a freshman at Utah State, and she's been telling me, she's like, Dad, I really want you to come out so I can take you to a Utah State men's basketball game, because they're just awesome here. Like the spectrum is incredible. I don't know how much you know about the
Yeah.
spectrum, Matt, but like it's well known. Their student section's pretty awesome. And so
It's raucous.
I actually am going to work it out that the CU women who I cover play at Utah on Wednesday night. So I'm flying
Oh,
out Tuesday
perfect.
morning. I'm going to spend a day with my daughter, take her to the Utah State men's game tomorrow night, and then go to cover the women, CU women at Utah in Salt Lake City on Wednesday night. So a business slash fun trip coming up this week, and go check out as a fan Utah State men's basketball, and they're actually playing CSU, so it's kind of
Oh,
funny
wow,
that
that is
they're
funny.
playing the Rams, and it's second and third place, second place Utah State, third place
Should be a good
CSU,
game.
so should be a good game, and
And normally you
yeah,
take your son to cool things like that. So it's cool to have a
yeah,
father-daughter trip like that. That's
yeah.
awesome.
Well, and she's already out there, because she's a freshman, so
Right.
and so she's excited, and she's going to skip a couple classes and hang out with me, and so um,
Man,
yeah,
you're
it'll be
letting her
fun.
skip class? Well,
Well,
you're getting soft in your old age.
she's 19. She can do what she wants.
Oh,
So, but anyway,
that's funny.
yeah. So it's been fun to get away a little bit, but there's certainly been plenty of news, which we want to talk about too. Again, nothing on the field other than the Shrine Bowl. I mean, those guys, went out there and sounds like they balled out, pretty well. Those receivers look pretty good, and you saw,
Sounds like they had a good week of practice, but weren't
yeah,
heavily involved in the game. Is that right? From what I was
yeah. I mean,
following along?
there was one report that GMs were they told Jimmy Horn don't play.
Wow.
We saw enough. Um so yeah,
Yeah,
I don't
when you
know.
see his speed in person, you're like, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. And LeJonte, I'm sure, made a great impression, as did Will. Those guys are studs, and Shiloh sounds like he had a good week too.
Well, that's what those bowl games are more for the practices anyway, for than the actual game. And
100%.
so
Yeah.
it's for the scouts. They get a whole week to watch these guys. And you heard mixed reports from Shiloh, but the overall ones were that he looked pretty good down there, and made some plays in the game, which was good. And so
Good.
Yeah.
I didn't get a
Uh,
chance to watch it at all. I've been slammed here lately.
yeah, I wound up not even watching the Shrine Bowl. I was
Yeah.
going to cover it, but I wound up not even watching it. But yeah, I followed some of the coverage there and sounded like they did pretty well. But as far as this current team, obviously the headlines over the last month have been coaching, and
We
the
got to
main
open the book on 25, Brian. We
right.
closed it. We
Well,
closed it on 24 at the end of our last episode. It's time to open the book on another season.
yeah, and Coach Prime will be the coach, from what it appears, and
Good place to start.
good place
Yeah.
to start because
Yeah.
I mean, but honestly, so many of the headlines in January were,
Yeah.
Coach Prime to the Raiders, Coach Prime to the Cowboys, and um, you know, I think a lot of people ran with Jerry Jones and Deion Sanders have talked about the head coaching position. That doesn't mean that it was going to happen. They talked about the position. You and I have talked about the Cowboys position, so I'm sure it was deeper than that. But ultimately, he doesn't get hired by the Cowboys, doesn't get hired by the Raiders. The Saints were the last team without a head coach, and looks like they're going with Kellen Moore. So that's the last one, and we never thought it would happen with the Saints anyway. But Coach Prime is going to be here, and I think Buff fans are pretty happy about that.
Yeah, I was listening to his comments at Super Bowl Media Week over the last week, and he did several different appearances where he addressed it. He definitely thought about the prospect of what it might look like.
Yeah,
Pulling it off was going to be really challenging, and I think at the end of the
in
day,
Dallas for sure.
in Dallas for sure. I think just
Yeah,
anywhere in general, it was going to
yeah,
be tough to make that happen because I think the truth is that it was all about his sons. He doesn't want to go to the NFL, at least from everything that he said, and he is a man of his word publicly. From everything that we've been around, he doesn't lie to you. He keeps it honest with you. Maybe he'll omit some things like coaches do, but he really doesn't tell you the wrong thing, at least in my opinion, on
right.
any big stuff. And he's been very consistent about this. And so the only way it would have ever made sense for him to consider it is if he could have copy and pasted what they have from, high school, Pee Wee to high school to Jackson to Colorado, then to the NFL. That would have been the only way that I think he would have been truly interested in doing it, because I don't think he wants to coach in the league. He's got
Yeah,
everything he wants here. And the one thing that he said at Super Bowl Media Week is, I don't do anything in my life right now that I don't want to do at this
yeah.
stage.
He doesn't have to.
That's the goal.
Right.
That's it. If you if
Yeah.
you reach that stage of life, you've won.
Yeah.
Okay? And he's won. And so to take him out of this would have to be the prospect of just an unbelievable opportunity. And from that part, I really do believe him. I also believe that he did think about it, because I think it's an exciting, kind of prospect to think about bringing the Sanders family dynamic into the NFL, but the logistics and the feasibility, I think at the end of the day, is just way too hard to try and iron out. And hey, with the moves that we're about to talk about, with what he's done over the last month, he's set up a pretty good foundation here, Brian,
Hmm.
of feeling comfortable. He's got more of his guys in the room now, and I think that's going to help soften the blow from losing Travis Shador and Shiloh in that class.
Yeah. I mean, frankly, the easiest place for him to have done that would have been if Tennessee had an opening. Then you really worry because Tennessee has the number one pick, and you could see him going hard for that job and then drafting Shador number one and things like that. But yeah, I think honestly, you and I have talked about this. I don't remember if we talked about it on our last show or not, but to me, his interest really stemmed from, I think that it was a pretty emotional couple of weeks around the Alamo Bowl, before and then after that reality of, oh my gosh, this is over, and not really enjoying the prospect of of coaching without his sons. And I think, and again, I don't know if we talked about this before, but like, I understand that. I know it's a very different scale, but I think I was telling you before, I coached my son in baseball for a few years, until this last spring. It was really hard, and I was sad, coaching that last game and knowing that I was done coaching him, and that's hard. And he's been coaching his sons longer than I coached mine, and on a very different level. And so, as a dad, I understand where he would be coming from there. I don't blame him at all for having those feelings. I think those are natural human feelings. And so I think that's where it stems from. But ultimately, I don't know if the opportunity was ever there for him to go to the NFL. I think it was
It wasn't.
discussion, but I
It
don't know if the
wasn't.
opportunity was ever there. And so I will say one last thing on there's been a lot of it's died down a little bit with all the openings filled now, but there was a lot of fans that were clamoring for get that extension done, get that extension done for Coach Prime. I think the urgency on that is lessened. I think it'll get done, but there's no urgency on that anymore. I mean, he's got 3 years left. It's not like you know, you got to lock him up because he's going to the last year of his deal. He probably deserves a raise, and I think an extension's
100% does.
coming.
Yeah,
I mean,
100% deserves a raise.
yeah, and I think it's coming, but the urgency on that, and you alluded to some of the moves. I think what we're seeing with some of these other moves is Coach Prime at this point in time is a little bit more focused on let's take care of this staff first, and then we'll get to me, and that's kind of how he's operated. He's always kind of done that. And so I think that that's kind of the pattern we're seeing is, let's take care of Robert Livingston. Let's get this filled, this filled, this filled, and then we can worry about me.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what the story is there behind the scenes. I imagine the only two people who really know are he and Rick. From what we've been told, there has been an offer for basically his entire tenure here. There was one last
Yeah.
year, I was told, and there is one now, which is better.
Yeah.
On his desk. If he wants to sign it, he can sign it. For whatever reason, it's not. But to your point, this is still relative. We're just getting to like the midsection of this contract. This is
Yeah.
still relatively early. Does he deserve a raise? Absolutely. However, he's also been very adamant in the past that dollars and cents isn't necessarily his number one priority right now. And if he feels like he has more opportunity to build the program around him, if he doesn't then take a massive salary, I think that's also something he's got to consider,
Yeah.
especially with the stage of the game that we're at with NIL and the collectives before the house settlement and revenue sharing really gets underway. Because if he takes a huge chunk of money, that's going to put CU in a real bind as far as building the rest of it in
Yeah.
the immediate, because we already know they're struggling to compensate everything as it is. It's kind of like it's been a checks in the mail situation since he's arrived. And at one point you figure, okay, hopefully they can make up for it, but it's not that we're not there yet. And so I think he's cognizant of that too, and what that type of pressure would do for the program. And you're starting to see some moves, I think, that indicate that he is thinking about what Boulder long term and what that means. I don't know.
Yeah.
3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 10, who knows? But he has been on the record, and I know he was saying it in jest, saying he wants his face on the mountains. Well, if you want your face on the mountains, a really good way to do that is to bring in Marshall Falk to be your running backs coach, right? It's to bring in Andre Giroud to help be your offensive line, part of your offensive line staff. What is he? O-line coach? Isn't that what is?
Well, I think he's assistant O-line coach.
Assistant O-line coach. He's a part of the brain trust of
Let
the
me say
O-line coaching staff.
real quick before we move on to that.
Yeah.
One last thing about the contract extension is that I was talking to somebody up there recently, and I said I get the impression that this is more of a, because people look at when they hear there's an offer on the table and he's not signing it, they're like, uh-oh, what's wrong with this offer?
Sure.
What's he haggling for? And I said I get the impression this is more of a Coach Prime's like, oh, I'll get to it eventually,
Mm-hmm.
and not a a haggling situation. They're like, that's correct. That it's
I,
more
I
of
would
a
imagine so. Yeah,
that
it's
it's
definitely
more of
not
a
his
yeah,
top priority.
we'll get around to it. I mean, look, we know he's been busy and things like that. So I just want to make that comment on the extension. Is
Good point. Yeah,
I
good
think
point.
I think it's going to happen, but I just don't think it's his number one priority right now.
No, I don't think this is a situation yet that he necessarily wants to sign up for like a 7 to 8 year commitment right at the moment. He's still trying to figure out the next chapter in his own life. And we know it was a real challenge over the last month. I imagine he's doing a little bit better, now as things have started to kind of settle down. Maybe he's not. I don't know him at all. So
Yeah.
I just think that having more of his guys on staff, knowing more of what he wants, being more comfortable now in phase 3. The truth is this is a fresh start this year. College football to me is no longer linear. Like there isn't just a 4 years, okay, at the senior year everybody's gonna be really good, and then maybe you take a step back because some of your impactful guys left, and maybe it takes a couple of years to build. But that's not really how it works anymore. And so I think it's
which we saw that very recently with that 2016 team with CU, where it was a bunch of guys that played a lot as freshmen and sophomores, got the crap beat out of them, early in their careers, Junior year, they were much better, had close games. Senior year, they had a phenomenal year. And then they all left, and 2017 was a step back.
100%. And now you can flip the script in a year if you
Yeah.
do enough to change your roster. You didn't really used to be able to do that at all, and a lot of that is because of Coach Prime and how he decided to build things at CU and essentially opened up this new avenue to overnight shift the program, and it's been copied in several different locations with success. I look at
Yeah.
Indiana and Arizona State, and Arizona State is really never talked about as doing that, but they copied his playbook to a T.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting to see how that all played out. I think he needed some time to sort out. He also mentioned on one of those appearances, he needed some time to pray. He always talks about how big decisions in his life are made through prayer and asking God what, he needs to be doing. And right now, this is where he feels like he needs to be. And I think look, I don't know, I'm not that age yet. I've never had that opportunity to have kids and then watch them grow into young adults myself. But from an empathetic perspective and a sympathetic perspective, I could see how a person would need to evaluate their life and maybe just take some time to think things over after a huge, because it's not like it was just 2 years at Colorado. It was 18 years of their lives,
Right. Yeah.
of raising these kids, not 18, 22 because of
Yeah.
college. It was a different perspective. So it wasn't just that a 2 year cycle was ending. It was that all of that was changing. And most you don't normally go to college and your dad comes with you. You know what I mean? Like that's not
Right.
typically how the path goes, and that's how it went here. So probably took a little bit longer to separate. And even Shador made that kind of tongue in cheek joke that dad has separation anxiety, right? So
Yeah.
I thought I thought that was funny as well. And now
When
here
yeah,
we go,
when
Brian.
his dad was apparently trying to FaceTime him during meetings with teams at the Shrine Bowl, and he's like, "Dad, it's over."
Yeah, which we talked about. I mean,
Yeah.
Coach Prime couldn't even get Shador to go on vacation last offseason with him. Shador's ready to
Yeah.
spread his wings. I mean, it's
But he's
time.
also, I also saw Shador on his own podcast. I think he was with Bucky or Darius or one of
Yeah.
them, and he was asked about that, not being coached by his dad. And he goes, "Well, why wouldn't I want to be coached by my
Right.
dad? Like
Yeah, that's
he
totally
knows me
different.
better than anybody." And so there's that. So there's two sides of it. But
That's
uh
100% right. But being a
yeah,
young man, I mean,
yeah.
I totally understand where he's coming. It's like, hey, I need a little breathing room, pops. That's
I've got
that's
I've
kind of
got
the
two that are out of the house and another one that's a senior in high school, and they all have had that feeling. It's like they want to go somewhere. So I've been around that age a lot, with
yeah.
them and their friends in the last few years, and you see it all the time. I mean, kids want to get out and spread their wings, and um, you know, obviously they love their dad and they're
Yes.
very close to them, but at
Yes.
some point you want to spread your wings a little bit. So I think it'll be good for them.
I think it'd be good for everybody involved, and it'll be fun
Yeah,
because the other part of it is Coach Prime has talked about now he can just focus on being a coach and not a dad. And
yeah,
I think in some situations, maybe people would be a little afraid to say that because maybe the team takes it the wrong way. But Coach Prime's just kind of telling you where he's at and how he feels. It's like, hey, sure, am I going to be a father figure to a lot of these guys? Yes. But there's also this very real factor that I was a dad. And that is the number one most important thing to me. So that was
yeah,
always on my mind. So now I can really focus all my energy into coaching. And I can't wait to see how it looks because they have a huge task because it's not carrying things over from last year. Like I think, at least in my opinion, I think it's a fallacy to think that really the bulk of what happened last year plays into what moves forward now for
right.
this program. I do. You're gonna have the culture maybe be there, but as far as the actual nuts and bolts of everything, it's fundamentally different. And it starts with how you want to play, who you're going to build things around. And the one thing I think about this staff that they're going to be really well equipped to do in this non-linear era of football is change on a year-to-year basis based upon who they have and the strengths of their personnel, as we saw with Robert
Yeah.
Livingston last year, coming in, assessing what he had, and then building the system around that. And I think this spring period is massive for this upcoming season and the one after it, quite frankly.
Well, to your point, and I'll use a little bit of an analogy. I don't know how much it applies, but you look at the CU basketball teams right now, and both of them last year were, kind of, I'm talking about last year. You
I know.
can
Sorry,
don't cover
sorry,
your
sorry,
eyes
sorry.
yet. But they were star-studded teams, right?
Yeah,
They had a lot of senior, core seniors, and both basketball teams. The women made the Sweet 16. The men were, went
on
to the
the
second round.
almost made the Sweet
Almost
16.
made the Sweet 16 with, they had three NBA draft picks, and you know, there's all that stuff, and both teams lost a lot of those players, and the men are atrocious this year. The women, they're on the very much on the tournament bubble, and they've got some both teams have some players back, but it's not the same. And
No,
so there was nothing that happened last year for those programs that you look at this year and say, "Yep, it's carrying over." There's
great
it's a
point.
whole new um, thing. It's the same coaches, but it's
Especially not the star players,
right.
right? Like
And
that's a big part of it
right.
too.
And so it's the same exact coaching staff on both those teams,
Yeah.
but it's brand new rosters, and it doesn't totally carry over, and it doesn't mean you can't have success. The women are doing okay, and they're on the tournament bubble.
Yeah.
The men are just having a disastrous season, but like with football,
Well,
I think
there's a
to
lot
your
more that goes into that. Yeah.
yes, but to your point with football is um you're I'm not trying to make a judgment what they're going to be like this year. It's just, I agree with your point that it's going to be very different. Whatever happened in
Yeah.
2024, okay, that's done. Close the door. We're in a new room now, right? It,
100%.
it's a brand new team, and even though there's some players there's obviously quite a few players that were on the team last year, but it's not your alpha dogs. It's not Shador, Shiloh, Travis,
Cam.
Jimmy, LeJonte, Cam. I mean, Bentley and Kai Hill Green. I mean,
Hmm.
go down the list, and there's still good players there, and it
Yeah.
doesn't mean they're not going to be good. It's just going to look very, very different, and so it's going to be curious to see what it looks like. And look, you got some new faces in the coaching staff as well, and so it's going to look very different. I'm excited about it because I'm curious to see how this all comes together.
Yeah, I think it starts with your leadership tent poles in your position rooms.
Yeah,
Shador's gone, Cam's gone, Shiloh, a bunch of guys in the receiver room. You kind of go through most of them except for offensive line, although I guess you could kind of lump them in because they're changing position coaches, even though Gunnar White's sticking around and George Hageman was there last year.
yeah.
It's a little bit different, though. And so I just think from a coaching perspective, you can't quite trust maybe the in-room leadership as much as you did when you knew Shador and Travis were in there because you knew they would have some things buttoned up because of who they were
Mhm.
and what their standard is. Now I think it's a little bit more hands-on. Like
Mhm.
maybe this year they had to get hands-on with actually fixing and finding some workarounds with how they X's and O's essentially. Okay.
Yeah.
I think now it's another level of being hands-on and structuring how the leadership dynamics play out. And yeah, you want that stuff to develop organically, and it will, assuredly, but you now understand that you don't have like your eyes and ears out there. So
Yeah.
you almost have to be hyper vigilant and do double duty. I think that is a factor for sure.
Yeah, and it'll be very fascinating to see it come together. I think there's probably going to be some strong leaders on this team, and
I agree.
a Jordan Seaton type. There's an Arden Walker. There'll be some guys that are strong leaders. It's got to develop, and it's not going to be the same. And so,
Right. And I'm
and
not saying that they're not going to be strong. I'm
right,
saying
yeah,
that that process is going to have to go,
yeah.
and
The
unfold.
general point here is that
Yeah.
this is going to be just a very, very different year as opposed to. I mean, last year was really.
A carryover,
I mean,
big time.
it's not a carryover. I think it's a whole new era here.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if you call it era because, like you said, in college football, this is a whole
A
new year.
chapter.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a whole new chapter, whole new year, and so and look, the start of that is you and we're going to get more into the personnel on a next show, but I think we want more of the immediate stuff is the coaching staff and some new things there. I want to start with the extension to Robert Livingston before we get into some of the new guys there. You already mentioned one of them, but Robert Livingston getting the extension this last week, and that was huge. It's a 2-year deal, replaces he had 1 year left on the original deal. This replaces that. So he's in for the next 2 years. 1.5 million this year, 1.6 the year after that. The most the CU assistants ever made, Matt, is 850,000. And that was in 23 with Sean Lewis and then Charles Kelly. Um, Livingston made 800 grand last year. So this is almost double his salary. And he was coveted. this offseason. And so they rewarded him.
I love that, dude. He's an awesome guy, first of
Yeah.
all, just a human being, totally deserves it. Rising star.
Yeah.
And from what I know, he is not interested in leaving. His family love it here. They
Right.
they bought a house. He's got like 3 kids under 10 years old. Okay, it's a young family, and this is an amazing place to raise a family. For those of you who watch who don't know, especially, I mean, you did it with young kids.
Yeah.
Great
Yeah.
school system, extremely safe, just a wonderful family environment. And I know for a fact that he absolutely loves that, as does his wife, and they're not interested in leaving. Like from conversations I had with people that would know late in the year, that was never on his radar. So the fact that CU up the ante tells me that he probably had some other people that were sniffing around, I
Yeah.
would imagine. I don't think that even if it was for a bigger job, he would have left. Like, even if the raise didn't come through, I'm not sure that he jumps right away. But that is Coach Prime being loyal and rewarding his guys who he
Right.
knows are essential to the operation. And part of where CU can stabilize to a degree in areas that they haven't been in the past is upping their total pool for the assistant coaches, and that is a massive one because in the past they've lost good coaches
Mhm.
to better jobs because they could not compete with paying them. And we know that Colorado cannot offer top dollar in the transfer portal right now, just based upon what we've seen this offseason with how the portal's gone and NIL collective, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a good way to balance it out because Coach Prime now isn't going to sell on coming to play with Shadura Travis, and I know we don't sell here. He just when I say sell, it's
Yeah.
not selling the kids that you're going to start. It's selling the program, right? Making
Yeah.
your pitch. The pitch is going to be we have NFLU going on right here. It's NFL Prep Academy in Boulder, and our coaching staff is
Mhm.
consistent, and that's why you're coming here. And having linchpins in the system that are very important, like Robert Livingston, a guy who has a ton of energy. So Coach Prime can monitor things. He's got to keep his eye on things, and certainly they've got a great dialogue, but he can defer a lot to Robert Livingston because
Yeah.
Livingston's got the energy and the juice to want to do the job. And the two of them, I know for a fact that Livingston feels indebted to Coach Prime for the opportunity that he got because for
Yeah.
many years he was at the same level in Cincinnati. And I imagine that with the ladder climbing culture in the NFL, when you're stuck on the same rung for a couple of years, even if you're young, you probably start looking around and going, oh boy. And this was a major, major opportunity, and he came through in a big way. So I don't think he was necessarily in danger of leaving, but it also signifies that Colorado's getting more serious at this level if you
Yeah.
want to compete with some of the bigger programs around the country.
Well, and also to your point about him not leaving, look, the extension came in early February. A lot of the
Right.
jobs were already filled. If he was going to
Right.
leave this offseason, he probably would have already done it. And so,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I agree with you on all that. And it's interesting too, looking at the buyout because the buyout is not very big. It's pretty big the first 120 days. So for the next 4 months, but after that, it goes down significantly if he gets an NFL or NCAA job. And so, um,
Interesting. I didn't see that.
yeah, it's much lower than we've seen for previous assistants. So, it especially if he leaves after this next year, it goes down significantly. So, it'll be interesting to see how long he stays. But I think that was a good big move that the Coach Prime made there, and yeah, so the commitment to Coach Livingston, obviously, they reward him for what was really a good season.
That tells me two things really quickly. One, he doesn't want to leave. This is where he
Right.
wants to be, right? And
Yeah.
which is essentially what I just told you because they're not really worried about that. I assume that he made that guarantee. It's like, hey, no, no, no. That's the
Yeah.
type of guy he is. He's real. He doesn't
Yeah.
play games. Like he's not about I'm sure he'll negotiate a little bit, but he's not about all that. He is just
Yeah.
a down to earth guy. And it tells me that Coach Prime also recognizes that if Colorado has another good year, he's probably going to get some pretty sweet offers coming his way. And one of Coach Prime's biggest emphasis or emphasis, is that like moose, meese? Anyway, I'm
Emphases.
just
Yeah.
kidding. And one of Coach Prime's largest points of emphasis is that he wants an opportunity for people on his staff to rise up, which is a huge part of the reason why he made some of the moves that he made with this staff, which I'm sure we'll talk about now.
Yeah. And if Robert Livingston is has another great year and has an offer to go somewhere else and be a head coach or a coordinator in the NFL, then this is set up to where he doesn't have to, break the bank to get out of the contract and or the next team has to pony up some money
Yeah.
to get him out of the contract. That's usually how it works. But that was a good move for the Buffs. And it's interesting, Matt. The Buffs have always been, when you look at like where their coaches rank in the conference, they've always got some of the lowest paid coaches in the conference.
Yeah.
Um,
That's what I'm
looking at
saying, right?
looking at the USA Today database, uh, there's only two assistant coaches in the entire Big 12 last year that made more than 1.2. Livingston's going to make 1.5, and both of them were Utah's coordinators, one of which left in the middle of the season. And the new guy they hired, I don't remember his name, he's making 1.25 this next year. So now we don't know what the salaries are for the private schools, BYU, Baylor, and who's the other one? There's three private schools. I can't remember the other one, but we don't know the salaries for those schools. But
TCU?
yeah, that's it. So we don't know their salaries, but Coach Livingston is a top two or three paid assistant in the Big 12 this year.
He
That's
deserves
a,
it, man.
he
He is
does,
awesome.
but the point is, I mean, that's a huge change for CU. CU
It's a
Athletics
massive
doesn't do
change.
that, and so for them to do that is pretty big. And so yeah, so glad that he's moving back. Other assistants, I mean, they've obviously they lost Phil Lodeholt and Vincent Dancy to Mississippi State. Coach Flea is not coming back. We don't know why. I know his contract was up, and so he's not coming back. But you mentioned it earlier. The new running backs coach is Marshall Falk, uh, Pro Football Hall of Famer, who's never been a coach, but he's a Pro Football Hall of Famer.
Yeah, when I heard that, I was pretty fired up for several different reasons.
Yeah,
Number one, that is Coach Prime, right? You
yeah,
don't get that anywhere else. That's Coach Prime. It's now the third Hall of Fame, one of the best at their positions ever that is on this coaching staff.
yeah,
That's never been done before.
yeah.
I mean, you go through maybe pro or college. Have we ever seen three Hall of Famers on one coaching staff like this?
And not
I'm
only
not
that,
sure.
not only are they
Not
Pro Football Hall of Famers, but Coach Prime and Marshall Falk are College Football Hall of Famers, and Warren Sapp probably could be.
Yeah, 100%. Oh, yeah, Brian, these are Marshall Falk was the cover of one of the most popular video games of all time. I mean, this
Marshall
dude, I
Falk was a
loved
better
him.
version of Ashton Genty before Ashton Genty.
Oh yes, 100. Ashton Genty couldn't hold Marshall Falk's jock. All due respect.
And I love
Let's
Ashton
see
Genty. He's a
what
great player, but
let's see what he does
yeah,
at the NFL level. Okay,
yeah,
Falk was that dude. I
yeah,
love this hire. First
yeah.
of all, he and Sapp and Prime all know each other from their NFL Network days, so those guys are all great friends.
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine that it probably took a little convincing because Marshall Falk, I don't know if he had done anything the last couple of years. There were a few years there where he was like a regular on the panel with Rich Eisen and the whole crew. I don't believe he's been doing anything regularly. Maybe he's popped up here or there,
Well, it's
but
been
this
6 or 7 years.
yeah, and this
Yeah.
seems like a really good transition. I'm fired up. He's so well spoken, so articulate, and didn't I read something this year about how he's been helping some of the current NFL guys? I thought I heard something about that, and he's kind of like one of those guys you go to for advice at current
Well,
backs.
Saquon Barkley mentioned that he had contacted Marshall Falk for advice on something, and
Is that maybe
before a
that's what I
game, and
read at
so
some point? Either way, I could not respect the guy to a higher degree. Number one, this is a guy who needs to come into that running back room and running game and take it over. It's
yeah,
his. Here are the keys. It's 2 years of evidence that we really need help.
yeah.
Okay. And we talked about this last year. He may be the new running backs coach, but you can also have a running game coordinator. And one thing that Coach Prime mentioned during Super Bowl Media Week was Marshall Falk is one of the brightest offensive minds that he's ever been around. That's a huge addition. His eye for talent, I think, is needed desperately. And it's a great time for him to come in because one of the biggest shocks for me is that CU did not pick up a running back so far
Yeah.
in either their true freshman class or their transfer class.
Right.
That shocked would be an understatement, okay,
Right.
that there has been no turnover, just so everyone out there understands. I don't agree with Coach Prime that they've got the guys who can do it. They need serious upgrades.
Right.
But I got to imagine that going to the table in recruiting in the portal without the amount of money that it probably takes to pull some of these top guys when you can allocate it to different positions is trickier. But the other problem is CU has back-to-back years of zero evidence that they have any desire to run the football. Well, you bring Marshall Faulk in. If you average 15 carries to running backs a game, with Marshall Faulk on staff, he might just walk off the field,
Yeah.
after like week 5. Like that can't happen. So this is the most encouraging part to me that Colorado is serious about revamping their running game, because there ain't no way that you're giving, your lead back 7 touches a game. If Marshall Faulk's your running backs coach, he might just choke out Coach Prime. Okay. Like that just can't happen. So that is a
Yeah.
big sign for me that Coach Prime understands it. He knew he needed some help. I imagine that this has been in the making for a while. This couldn't have been like on a whim. Hey,
No.
Marshall, you want to do this? This is probably like all year. Like, hey
I
man,
think
what
it
is
was
going on? We need your help.
I think it was Rich Eisen that asked Coach Prime that last week on the show. He's like, "How long has this been in the works?" And Coach Prime kind of smiled and said, "A while."
Did
You
he? Oh,
know,
I missed that
yeah,
one. That makes
yeah.
sense.
So,
Okay.
and who knows what a while is? But the other part, Matt, is that Tommy Robinson, who was on the staff this last year as like a quality control guy, is now he's been named the assistant running back coach. And for those that don't know Tommy, I mean, he's been coaching a long time. I just pulled up his resume, but I mean, uh, running backs coach at Texas A&M, LSU, USC, Texas, Arizona Cardinals. He was running
Cowboys.
backs coach at Miami. Yeah, Dallas Cowboys, not the running backs coach, but he was a
Right.
special teams coach. He was Coach Prime, special teams coach with the
That's right.
Cowboys for a little bit. So yeah, he's been coaching a long time. So that duo, and I'll say this, I wrote this in my Falk story that I haven't really seen anybody else talk about, but I think it's a big part. Do you remember uh Alamo Bowl week? Somebody asked, I think it was Jake from DNVR asked Sataki and Coach Prime at that press conference, if there's one thing you could change about college sports, what would you do? And Coach Prime, he tells Sataki, he goes, you go first, coach. And then when Coach Prime, it was his turn, I would make financial literacy classes mandatory. Okay. And
Yeah.
which makes sense because of all the NIL thing. Well, you know what Marshall Falk's been doing the last several years? He's been working in the financial industry and teaching financial literacy.
Wow.
So I have to imagine that was a very large part of this
I'm sure it
hire.
was part. I'm sure it was a part. I don't know about large, but I think it's a benefit to the
I think,
hire.
yeah,
I mean, you
I
get
think,
Marshall Falk. That's I think all the reason enough you would need.
yeah, but I've got to think that was part of the deal, was why he wanted him there, because he's got that knowledge and that industry knowledge of being able to bring to
Yeah.
the players.
You're probably right on that, because he hired George Hageman and made him his, what was it, director of leadership or whatever it is.
Yep.
There are key elements that he likes to highlight within the program, and
Yeah.
that probably helped things along as well. And the fact that Marshall's just probably a brilliant offensive mind, as to use
Right.
Coach
Yeah.
Prime's own words.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm
So
I'm fired up about it. I can't wait. Like that's kind of what I'm talking about. Easier to lose Shadur and Travis if you got your boys from NFL Network with you, who, oh, by
yeah,
the way, are gold jackets and are going to, even though Marshall Falk hasn't, has he coached at all ever?
not that I
No.
could find. No.
Okay, fine. I mean, it's Marshall Falk. I mean, this
Yeah.
guy, he's in Canton for a reason. So
Yeah.
I am overwhelmingly excited to see that take place, because for Colorado, in their fresh start reset that they're about to embark on, they have to change the way they play, and running the football and being a balanced offense has to be the number one priority. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
it just does. If they learned anything from the last 2 years, they fell woefully short. And I know they were catering to Shadur, and Shadur is brilliant. This isn't taking away from him, but they failed in that regard to recognize how much a running game could have actually helped them to win more football games when they had him there. And
Yeah.
playing a little bit differently may have actually been a benefit to him, and not maybe enabled some of the stuff that got them into trouble. Obviously, personnel hurts, but they've learned a lot. And that's the one thing I do want to give Coach Prime a ton of credit for. It shows with the staff. He's learned a ton, I think, about who he is himself and himself as a coach and this whole process. Because
Yeah.
this was very new. I mean, on the big stage, sure, he's been coaching, but it was different. He'd never admit it publicly, but it was 100% different. And taking the L's on the chin like they did in 2023 taught him a lot. And they
Yeah.
were forced to learn, and they did learn because they want to get better. And you're seeing that in their actions now into year three. They're not going out and getting, the Kent State offensive coordinator. Coach Prime knows who he wants.
Yeah.
It's guys with NFL experience, and I'm sure a lot of coaches would like that, but they don't have the pull that he does to actually get them. And,
Yeah.
and so now here you go with, to me, what seems like an awesome way to spend kind of this chapter of his life, building this little NFL breeding ground in Boulder where you call all the shots.
Yeah. Well, and look, the other aspect of the running game is the offensive line, and the other aspect of Coach Prime is he likes to elevate people that have worked for him. That he likes to elevate people that work hard that have worked for him, right? And that's what we've seen with the offensive line. Is I think it's not a flashy hire at all, but Gunnar White has been elevated. Phil Holt leaves, and it's interesting they're going with kind of a co-offensive line coach, Gunnar White and George Hageman, and then Andre Garrod, the assistant offensive line coach. So that trio. Now we saw the trio last year with Sapp, Dancy, and Damian Lewis. I think they're trying to duplicate that a little bit with that trio on the offensive line. But you reward Gunnar White for his hard work. He's been working for Coach Prime for the last several years, working his way up. And then you got those two NFL guys. Andre Garrod, a CU Hall of Famer, and one of the great Dallas Cowboy linemen in recent decades, and then George Hageman played for the Cowboys as well. So it's an interesting group there, coaching the offensive line.
Is it? I mean, you're the CU historian here, but I remember growing up, wasn't it Gerard or maybe Gerode?
I think it's Garrod,
All right, now we're gonna
but I
need to
don't know.
know.
I
Drop
don't
him
know.
in the. I'm 90% sure. Like growing up, I remember it was Gerard, but I think that was wrong. I think it's Gerode. We're gonna need somebody in the
I don't think
comments
it's
to be.
Gerode. I think it's either Gurod or Gerard.
All right, somebody get in the comments and tell us the appropriate way.
We're gonna
Okay,
need to
so
talk to Andre so we can find out.
yeah, I mean, you didn't cover the program back then, right? I mean,
No,
did Adam at that stage?
I don't think so. I think that's
No, I mean
before
that
Adam
predates
even.
Adam. I mean, if you predate
Yeah.
Adam, you're a dinosaur. I'm just
Right.
kidding. Anyway, okay, so a couple things here. We didn't know what they were going to do. I think you're spot on that they saw how having multiple minds on the case helped defensive line wise. I think you've got two guys here who played in the NFL that's very important. Clearly, he's got a lot of trust in Gunnar White. I don't think he saw Phil Lodeholt leaving as a huge loss or some sort of
Yeah.
irreplaceable thing. I really
Right.
don't. I think he said, "Okay, congratulations, happy for you." But I think he's got his own vision on that one. I think there were mixed reviews from what I'd heard behind the scenes about the quality of coaching that Lodeholt brought to the equation. And to be honest with you, I think that kind of came out in the wash because
Yeah.
yeah, they were better than last year, but they had some better talent than last year. But they couldn't run block worth a damn this year, and he should have had a little bit more to do with that, in my
And the
opinion.
pass blocking wasn't dramatically better.
No, it really wasn't. And from what I'd heard behind the scenes before the year, somebody told me, hey, red flag on this one. This might not be the right one. And look, it's also understandable because you don't get this right every time.
Yeah.
And that was just Coach Prime's second year in this situation and his first time being able to pick a guy. And he picked an NFL guy. But here comes the learning process. Okay, I don't just need an NFL guy. I need an NFL guy who X, Y, and Z. And I think he's got that with Hageman. And I think he's got that with Gerard. I'm going to go and say Gerard. If it's Gerard, please somebody else tell me. And then Gunnar White, I think, is your orchestrator. And he must have made a very large impression on Coach Prime to
Yeah.
give him that opportunity. I do want to say one thing about Gerard, okay? Bringing him back, Gerard. We haven't seen Coach Prime hire a buff to the staff yet, right?
Right.
That's a big one. That's a big one because Gerard's picture is everywhere in CU history. He's a part of some of the better CU teams throughout history, Brian. Okay?
Yeah.
I mean, he was one of the better players in CU history. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and I don't know if in the inside the IPF they've got some of those murals up of some of the greats.
He's got to be up
I
there.
don't know if he's one of them or not, but it's interesting if he is that players have seen his
He
name.
played forever in the NFL, didn't he? Didn't he have like a 10-year career? Maybe
Yeah,
I'm
something
wrong
like
on that
that.
one.
I think he made like the all-decade team for the Cowboys.
100%. No, he was a hell of a football player. I mean, he really, really was. I'm trying to think of his numbers. Yeah, 2002 through 13, 11 years. First
Yeah,
team All Pro in '07, second team All Pro in '09, five-time Pro Bowler. He was a consensus All American in 2001 and a two-time first team All Big 12 member in 2000 and 2001. This is
yeah,
why I think it's important. Some of the tradition has gone by the wayside. I find it hard to believe that he's going to be in the locker room after a big win and cool with not singing the fight song. Okay, from that era, find it hard to believe. The
yeah,
guy with the darkened face, man. This is no nonsense, dude here.
yeah,
Okay. I love the fact that he's on staff because it's not just the fight song. I think it's connecting and being able to sell what Colorado is, especially to offensive linemen.
yeah.
That's important. I think that Phil Lodeholt maybe tried, but yeah, he was a Colorado guy in that he was a military family, right? Kind
I
of
think
bounced
so. Yeah,
around a little bit. Gerard's a Colorado guy. He's a buff.
yeah,
He's not just a Colorado guy. That's a big deal, man. And he's one of the legends in the program. It's akin to me of bringing like a Hagen on staff or something like that. Like that's the impact it could have
yeah.
with kind of instilling, kind of meshing the two cultures. And Coach Prime has a previous relationship with him, so I think didn't they have crossover in the Cowboys because he was there 2002
I
and
don't think
2010.
so because
Yeah,
wasn't
he had to have, right.
I don't know when I don't know. I don't remember when Coach Prime left the Cowboys.
No, no, he didn't. He didn't have any. That's strange. But I imagine that he did. You're right, because Prime was only there for 4 years.
They were in the
So that'd
league
be
at the
nine.
same time.
Yeah, definitely were. So I
So
imagine that there was a previous relationship there at some point. The point was
yeah,
is that you have a CU legend on staff, and I think that's a really big deal. I think it's a
yeah.
really big deal.
Yeah, the other move, George Hilo, who was on the staff last year as a defensive assistant, is now taking over that spot that Vincent Dancy vacated, and I like that move as well. I mean, George Hilo has been around a while, and coaches some big places, and players seem to take to him. There was a lot of players who were asked about George Hilo throughout this last season. They always said complimentary things about him. Of course, they're going to, but they seem to really like George Hilo, so I think that's a good hire as well.
Uh, I want to get to Hilo just one second. The last point I want to make about the offensive line trio, along with Falk, this shows me that they are wanting to mix up the way that they play offense a little bit. You
Yeah.
got a couple guys with different skill sets there. So let's combine that with Pat Shermer's, background. Now that Shermer's getting the keys back, because he's really getting the keys.
Yeah.
Shador gave him the keys back as he checked out and cleaned out his locker, right? So,
He's sort of been
we
the
tongue in cheek.
he's
Yeah,
sort of been like you know, the
the
student driver where
figurehead.
Shadur's driving and
Yeah.
Shermer's in the passenger seat, kind of,
Left, left,
giving him
left,
advice
left.
or whatever.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
But now it's like, the student driver's out and Shermer's got to get in that get behind the wheel.
100%. So I think it's good. Do I think it's going to work? I don't know yet
Yeah.
because it's impossible to say, especially with offensive line, but they're trying. I want to recognize that they realized that last year's iteration, and even with Lodeholt leaving, wasn't working. So
Yeah.
they're trying something different, and I'm
Yeah.
giving them full marks for that because, again, as we've talked about, developing an offensive line is the toughest thing there is to do, and building a good one's
Mhm.
even harder. And so you got to keep trying different things. And I give Coach Prime a lot of credit for that. I do. We can rag on them for not running the ball and having a line that really wasn't as developed as maybe they should have been, but they're trying, man. They are
Yeah.
trying, and it's hard. George Hilo, love that he was brought. I look, Dancy's a great guy. And I think he's, a dog in his own right. For Hilo to come in late in the year and then all of a sudden be the guy working the whiteboard at halftime told me everything I needed to know about the level of respect they have inside the building for him. He
Yeah.
would come down with the adjustments, and you'd see him in some of these well-off videos working the whiteboard at half. That would not happen if they didn't have complete trust in him.
Right.
From everything I've seen, I can't wait to meet him this year. He seems like an absolute dog, somebody you'd want to play for. Love his addition with Lewis and Sapp. That's awesome. I think that adds
Yeah.
another extra dynamic to it. I think he has been a great addition, and everyone has had nothing but great things to say about him. So
Hmm.
two thumbs up on the Hilo ascension. The only one that
Yeah.
I will say, if we're going to be honest, that I kind of looked at like that was making Michael Pollock the special teams coordinator because he was a quarterbacks coach, right, for the last 2 years, technically.
Well, the last couple of years he's been a quality control guy. I'm not sure what he was over. I know he's been the offensive coordinator. He was the offensive coordinator at Jackson
Yeah,
for a little bit for Coach Prime. So, but he's coached a lot of everything in
yeah,
his career.
yeah. And look, I'm not questioning Coach Prime's judgment because he crushed it last year. Okay,
Yeah,
he did. And this is nothing against Coach Pollock because he seems like an awesome dude. Every time he's got a, infectious smile. Seems like the kids absolutely love him. But you see some of the stuff like what Kenny Dillingham did at Arizona State, going to an FCS program, finding a guy who is a special teams guru, and then bringing him into the fold. I
yeah,
just don't know how big of an effort there was to go find a special teams guy and bring him into the fold. I know that Pollock, you said, was a long snapper at Georgia. I understand that.
yeah,
And look, I get it. My point was last year there were some times that they got outcoached special teams wise so egregiously, including in the BYU game. I thought there's no way that he doesn't go out there and find some guy who's the shit, excuse me, at special teams. Like
yeah,
some guy who's a nerd. Like you talk to Sean Payton and the Broncos coach last year, Mitch Westhoff, is 70-year-old. He's like the OG of special teams. These guys like get wicked crazy about special. They're weird as hell, man. Like they are different. And I thought that maybe he'd go do that. Clearly, he likes what he sees in Pollock, and I hope it works out. I do. I'm rooting for the
yeah,
guy, but I will be 100% honest because that's what we are. That one went okay. Oh, I
yeah,
trust him. He gets the benefit of the doubt from me after last year, but I'll definitely have my eye on it because it's strange to me that was the move. I didn't expect that.
yeah. Well, I didn't either, but I'll say this: uh, they're already going to be better at special teams because they went out and got oh my gosh, what's the kid's name?
Oh,
Uh,
Buchanan.
Yeah, Buchanan from Louisiana Tech.
Yeah.
CU was the worst team in the country at touchbacks. Buchanan was number two in the country in touchback percentage. The only one that was better was Tyler. I think it was Tyler Loop of Arizona was the only one that was better. So
Yeah.
you're automatically going to be better because you don't have to cover as many
Sure.
kickoffs. So there's that. And I'll say this. You and I when we were going back and forth when Pollock was hired, but I said, look. I just think that if you can coach football, you can coach, and and you've got time when that's your focus is special teams. Yeah, Michael Pollock's coached a lot of different things in football. I think he's a smart guy. Um, Clearly, Coach Prime trusts him. He wouldn't have kept him around this long.
Yep.
Not only here at CU, but at Jackson State, he's been around with him all these years. So he clearly trusts Michael Pollock. There's stuff that Michael Pollock does that we don't even know because we're not in the building.
Yeah.
And I think that if you know football, if you can coach football, and your focus now is special teams, I would guess, I don't know Michael Pollock, but just watching what I know of him, I would guess he's going to go all in this offseason on making the special teams the
I
best
hope
thing there
so.
is. And that's going to be his baby, and that he's going to, take it and run with it. And so I would expect CU to be better because you got Buchanan, but also because maybe you have a guy that's more into it, and this is your guy now, and he just runs with it and says, "All right, this is my thing, and I'm going to make it the best."
I
So,
hope so. I genuinely do. All I know is that they got embarrassed several different times
oh
last
yeah,
year
yeah,
and embarrassingly outcoached in that third phase,
but
in my opinion.
we've said we're turning the page. So
Yeah,
that
but
was last year.
I feel the same way about running back. Like they
Yeah,
drastically
I
changed
know.
that. I'm just sharing my thought. Hey,
Yeah, I
hey,
know. I
I
know.
hope it works out, buddy.
They
I
did get
do.
embarrassed. It
I'm
was a
not
weak
hating on
point.
him.
It was a weak
It
point
was
last year.
embarrassing.
Yeah.
And if you want to be a serious national title contender, you can't get embarrassed ever in any phase of the game.
Right.
And
Right.
if that's what you're talking about, having your face on the flat irons, you're talking about every last detail you've got ironed out. And I
Right.
think that from a guy who has shown us an incredible level of detail, he must have great belief that Michael Pollock can do the job for
Yeah.
year three. Because I don't think that they come off a year getting embarrassed like that. And yeah, you're right. Will Buck Buchanan make things look better? And hopefully Damon Greaves, their new punter, the new Aussie, who's I think even more Australian than Bassett was. He's got a thick accent, he does. Anyway,
Yeah.
that was my best Australian accent. It'll be better, but from a schematic standpoint, I mean, BYU clown them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I hope that that part is addressed because that's another weapon you can use. And I thought he might go out and try and do that.
Yeah. Well, and maybe he did.
And
We're
maybe he
gonna
did.
find out. And
We're gonna
so,
find out.
I'm gonna give him the benefit of the doubt, like you said, and
Yeah.
and we'll see. We'll evaluate that one probably
Seems like
during
a
the
great
season.
dude. I got nothing
Yeah.
against him. I just want to say that. He's always
Yeah.
smiling. He seems like an awesome
Right.
guy.
And we'll evaluate it at the end of the season. We'll also evaluate it during the season, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But Matt, we'll be back next week because I think there's a lot of personnel things we want to get into. We didn't really get into the schedule this time. There's plenty of time to talk about that. But there's so many things to get to. Spring ball starts 1 month and 1 day from now, March 11th, and so looking forward to that. And yeah, anything else before we wrap this one up?
Did you want to talk a little bit about? I know that we had the passing of Coach McCartney, and I'm sure
Oh yeah,
that
yeah,
we've talked that you've talked about it, and I know you and Adam were there. Unfortunately, I was busy that day and wasn't able to make it. But maybe you want to just kind of share your thoughts there. I'll start because I don't have many interactions with Coach McCartney. The only times I ever interacted with him were when he came to speak to other teams,
yeah,
other current CU teams, and just kind of seeing that and the reverence that every coach had for him. And kind of tough to have a coach that was relevant that long ago kind of connect, in my opinion, with today's player, especially with today's generation of kid.
yeah,
I mean, it's tough to get them to pay attention for 5 seconds to anything, let alone, their elders. So that part was always interesting to me. But I mean, he was also a state-winning basketball coach, high school basketball coach in Michigan, if
right.
memory serves, and
Only coach in Michigan history. I don't know if that's still true, but at least at the time, the only coach in Michigan history to win a football and basketball title in the same year.
and that's insane.
Yeah,
It's insane.
yeah,
And every one of his former players, he emotionally impacted.
yeah,
Like I know a lot of those guys I'm friends with, and those guys were torn up about it. And
yeah,
when that happens, the impact he had on somebody. And certainly the University of Colorado would be a blip on the map without him. So
yeah,
that is pretty cool that everybody came together to honor him, in such a way, and his grandson and his son, Mike, who's an agent, I believe now, and
oh yeah, yeah.
if I'm not mistaken, and his
He's the
grandson
agent
is,
for like Kirk Cousins and Aiden Hutchinson and some big guys. So
yeah, and his grandson's obviously on social media, big supporter of CU, and
yeah,
everybody loves him. So very, very sorry for the McCartney family for their loss, but also a very special moment that the CU community could kind of come together and cherish that man.
yeah. I didn't really get to know him that well, but a lot of the same interactions that you had probably. But the one thing that sticks out about me, out to me, is how universally loved he was by his players, and
Yeah.
you know, not just during that time that he passed away. And I talked to people, but I've heard it for years. But it was almost kind of funny to me that a lot of the guys would say the same things. So I talked to Darian Hagan, who I consider a friend.
Yeah.
I talked to him the day after that Coach Mac passed, and he's telling me, he goes, everything that Coach McCartney said on my recruiting visit and told my mom, that's exactly what happened. And then the day after that, I talked to Chad Brown, great linebacker at Colorado, and he's like, everything that Coach Prime said to me and my family on when he came to my house,
Coach
that's what that's yeah. What I say?
Coach Prime.
Oh yeah, Coach McCartney. He said everything that he said to me and my family, he goes, it came true. And and then there was a celebration, kind of a gathering at Bender's bar the night before the celebration, and I went over there and I was talking to people and talking to John Embry, who used to be the head coach here and now coaches with the Dolphins, and he's like, Brian, everything he told me and my parents at my house and during the recruiting visit, he goes, that came true.
Yeah.
And it's like, and this was all like separate conversations I didn't lead them into. It was all they were telling me like that whatever he told them on the recruiting trail, it all came true. And he was true to his word, and that's what he was. And that I've never heard so many players talk universally about their coach as he was a father figure to them, and just someone that they loved and endeared so much. And that group that won the national title in 1990, they're pretty close. And I asked Chad Brown, I said, how much of that is because of Coach Prime? And he goes, it is because of Coach Prime.
Coach
Because,
Mack.
oh my gosh, I'm so used to saying Coach Prime.
I know.
I said, how much of it is because of Coach Mack? And he goes, it is because of Coach Mack. He goes, it's because of him, because he taught us how to be a brotherhood and how to care for each other and things like that. And so, he was just universally loved. And to see the amount of people that were there at the celebration, and just players that I had a chance to catch up with Eric Bieniemy there, who I covered when he was the OC here. It was great to see Eric. JJ Flanagan, Jeff Campbell. These are guys, CU legends that we're talking about, that they were just also universally excited they were excited to be there. JJ Flanagan told me, he goes, look, I'm done crying about it. I'm just excited to be here with my friends
Yeah.
and celebrate this man that meant so much to us. And honestly, a lot of them were so sort of relieved as well, because Coach Mack had
Yeah.
suffered a lot in the recent years with dementia, battling Alzheimer's. So
It's hard,
a
man.
lot of them were relieved, and saying, obviously, we're sad that he's gone, but relieved that he's not feeling pain anymore. And his wife died years ago, and
Yeah.
a lot of people were excited that, hey, he's up with his wife now, and he's excited. So yeah, it's just a cool thing to be there, and clearly Coach Mack universally loved by Buff Nation. So it was pretty cool to be there.
Yeah, obviously never got to meet him when he was in his heyday, but I mean, from everything that I've ever heard, just full of piss and vinegar. I mean,
Yeah,
just an appetite for life, and obviously faith was really important to him, and he made being a Buff really mean something.
yeah,
I don't want to speak ill of what came before him, but the pride that he reinstilled, I mean, the pride and the tradition will not be trusted, to the timid or the weak, right? What isn't that it?
yeah. The
Isn't
pride and
that it?
tradition of the Colorado Buffaloes not be
Won't be
trusted.
entrusted to the timid or the
The
weak.
team of the week. Yeah,
That's him, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah. I think that says it all. And he was very upfront and unapologetic
yeah,
about who he was and what his team was going to be, but they played hard,
yeah,
and they were relentless, and that kind of translated into the university and into the current traditions. He helped mold a lot of those as well, and
yeah,
so, or at least the traditions that were. But
yeah.
that's a different topic for another time. And
This
yeah,
is why you have Andre Garrod back.
this is why I have Andre Garad. And the next episode, we're going to figure out, because one of our great listeners is going to drop it in the comments and tell us what to say. But yeah, I'm thinking
Yeah,
next episode we talk about, the rebirth,
yeah,
Act 3 of Coach Prime, right? I mean, there's going to be
it's
new
new. Yeah,
faces everywhere,
yeah.
and I'm looking forward.
Watching a
Looking
video
forward to
here.
it. I'm
Yeah,
still looking forward to it.
a video here of Julian Lewis, lifting weights, things like that. So yeah, we have plenty to talk about. We'll talk about that next week. But Matt, it was good to catch up with you today. It's been a
Yeah,
while,
buddy.
and glad you had fun on your vacation. And we'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for watching, y'all.